I am on holiday right now. I should not be filming anything for YouTube at the moment. The only thing I should be filming are videos of my food and of myself out shopping, because here I can actually find clothes that fit me correctly, but Netflix decided to interrupt my leisure with new Banofi. So let's talk about this briefly. Probably not briefly.
Pardon me, young lady. Could I trouble you for the next dance?
I am invisible and I am wet.
Hi, I'm LadyJenevia, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. Now, being that I am on a trip back home to my motherland, I do not have all of my usual gear with me, so I, as you can probably tell, am recording on my phone because it is easier for me to do it that way, and the vertical aspect ratio is simply because it's also easier for me to film that way based on the limited amount of equipment and stuff that I have with me. So I am also going to be following the notes that I put together from my laptop, so don't expect for me to make a ton of uncomfortable eye contact with the camera on my phone. Being that I currently have jet lag brain, I want to make sure that I don't miss any of the points that I would like to make. If you hear any peculiar noises at any point throughout this video, be aware of the fact that I am filming in a large city without my usual equipment, so there is not much I can do in the way of further enhancing the audio at the moment. So a quick recap and catch up. My full reaction to watching this new clip for the first time has already been published on my channel as a short. If you also happen to miss my video discussing the Valentine's Day event, which happened back in February, that video is up. It's been up for ages. I'm not sure why you missed it, but if you missed it, well, there you go. My compilation reaction to watching the sneak peek from that event is posted exclusively to my Patreon, which is also where you are able to get regular updates from me about which videos I'm working on next, and also get access to new Patreon exclusive videos every month. Following that point, I also already have a video filmed which covers the next two chapters, those being chapters 6 and 7 of An Offer from a Gentleman. I filmed that video weeks ago. By now it's probably more like a month ago. That was going to be the next video to get posted to the channel, and then I went to a 70mm IMAX press screening of Ryan Coogler's Sinners, and I went, well, obviously I'm going to need to talk about that.
It's like garlic to a vampire, Kathleen.
The ash.
If I had the ash, Kathleen, if I have enough of it on my face, it'll scare away those pesky Protestants.
So anyway, that is going to be the next video after this video, chapters 6 and 7 of An Offer from a Gentleman, unless Netflix would like to keep playing games and release some other massively important Bridgerton update that will jump to the top of my to-do list. So now let's just go through things one by one. Spoilers for Benedict's book, maybe Francesca's book if it comes up. It probably won't since she wasn't in the clip, but we'll just put that out there anyway. No spoilers for Eloise's book because I haven't read that yet. I will at some point and do a video on it as I did for Francesca's book. So quickly before we get into the clip itself, there was an official renewal announced for seasons 5 and 6 of Bridgerton. Now from my understanding, a fair bit of those stories have been set up already on the show. Clearly we will be doing Eloise and Francesca next. I don't see why they would skip past those two, particularly for someone like Eloise who has been more or less stuck in limbo since season 1, so let's just get on with that, shall we? Not to mention, Gregory and Hyacinth still seem like they're far too young to be the main Bridgerton of a Bridgerton season. And on top of that, Netflix takes forever to release a new season of their series. So 2 years for 8 new episodes, well, it's certainly a choice. La Venganza de Analia has taken a few years to get to a second season, but do you know how many episodes are in season 1? 56! So if you were looking for something to do to pass the time until 2026, when a new Bridgerton season will drop, might I recommend to you La Venganza de Analia. Someone had commented somewhere on my channel to let me know, because I had asked to be updated whenever the information became readily available to Spanish-speaking audiences of that series, whenever there would be some sort of update about that, and apparently something's moving, so I looked it up and there are adverts for season 2 now playing. I am grateful to be informed of that because I would not have known about that otherwise, but that trailer did not give me a release date either. All it said was muy pronto, and I went, okay, well, I'm assuming that means coming soon? Probably. What does it tell you that when it comes time to talk about seasons 5 and 6 of Bridgerton, I find myself veering off onto a tangent about a Colombian telenovela? Maybe I would have more to say about seasons 5 and 6 if those were promising a gripping tale of feminine rage and vengeance and justice against an evil politician who also happens to be your bio father who murdered your mother, and you were witness to all of that when you were a child, and then he tried to assassinate you because you were a witness, and in the midst of all of that, you're also going to reconnect with your childhood love, who is very handsome, and he's usually wearing perfectly tailored suits. I just answered my own question, didn't I, of why that would draw focus away from something that feels a lifetime away. Yep, that's definitely the case. Anyway, we will be doing, like I already said, an Eloise book video at some point, but until then, we have plenty of other books to read with their own adaptations coming out first, so those will definitely be up and running and continuing to be produced here on my channel. Not only do we have a renewal announcement, we have yet another reiteration of the fact that season 4 will be released in 2026. That is a release date we already knew about. I'm not really sure why people are bringing that up as if it's a talking point that merits much in the way of discussion. I understand that some people are wanting it to be out sooner rather than later, but my advice about that, and this isn't even me making a joke, maybe I would be making more jokes if I wasn't jet lagged, but find other things to watch. That's worked very well for me. Not just new things, but going back and watching more classic films. You can pick a genre, any genre, or a different country, and explore films from there.
I would say Brazil.
Rewatch a favorite film of yours that you haven't gone back and rewatched in however many years. Personally, I'm hoping that season 4 will come out in August of 2026 because that feels like you're giving the workers enough time to be able to do all the quality work that they need to do in post-production to ensure that the overall quality of the story doesn't get lowered by overly rushing to get to a finished result. And not to mention, I think that August would be well suited for the overall feeling and season of a Benedict and Sophie love story. It's been said more than once that their love story is one set in autumn, and it has that atmosphere and that vibe. And although August is technically a summer month, if you do late August, it already begins to feel like autumn. So, et voila, Benofi love story. Now, in addressing this clip, there were certain elements of it that we've already seen because they had revealed other official glimpses of the masquerade costumes, and before that there were a fair few of us who saw those paparazzi photos of Luke and Yerin when they were filming the masquerade, but it was the part where they're outside doing the dance lesson. Those Bridgertons and their gardens and their gazebos, I mean, they're always getting up to something or getting into something when they're out there.
Oh, you smell like dick. What the fuck you been doing?
Onto the clip itself, we begin with Benedict entering the masquerade ball, and he's looking around as if he's searching for someone. So we have a couple of options. One could be that he's looking for someone that he already knows, perhaps a family member. There are several to choose from. Another option could be that he's looking for Sophie because he had already seen her. He's already decided that he's interested in her. But one of my patrons had proposed this theory, let me try to pull this up in a different tab, where they were thinking that maybe he saw Sophie before this bit that we're seeing. Oh, I'll just read the theory from Patreon. I wonder if he's seen her outside the house or outside the ballroom before this moment, but she did something very non-typical of the Ton that caught his attention, because that to me was a man actively searching the ballroom for someone, I think her. My theory is he saw her help and show kindness to a member of the Bridgerton staff on his way in, and it marked her as different and special. But before he could approach, he got waylaid by his mother/sister/brother. And so this was him in hunt of her. And yet again, he sees her being unique, and he's in awe of the fact that she's different, and he has to know her and find out more. It's a fun theory, and it would be a good way of establishing this difference in economic class and social norms between them, of how they've been living up until this point. Sophie's only nice relationships that she has are all with members of the household staff, people who actually work for a living.
What should be so terrible about Bloomsbury? That the people there actually work for a living.
That's why, in looking back on things now, I really like Benedict's season 1 and 2 love interests, because they make a lot of sense in establishing who he is in the context of eventually ending up with Sophie and the backstory that she has as a character. Now, mind you, he was already my favorite Bridgerton when I watched those 2 seasons, and now all these years after, and I've read his book, it just makes a lot of sense in that context. Random detail before we proceed with further Benofi ongoings. Who is this diva walking around with her eyes fully covered? But back to Benofi. If we assume he's looking for Sophie, just to play out this theory, or looking for someone else and then he sees her, either way, you cannot tell me that this response he has to seeing her is anything but insta-love. Benedict has had other love interests on the show. We've seen them, and he has not looked at a single one the way that he is looking at Sophie Baek right now. But I also wanted to pull an excerpt from the book, since I was going through things very quickly because I'm on holiday whilst making this, as I will probably bring up multiple times, because why did they release this now?
What are you gonna be when you grow up?
A burden on society.
Anyway, this is from chapter 11 from Benedict's point of view. Benedict had never been a superstitious man, and he'd certainly never thought himself the sort with a sixth sense. But once or twice in his life, he'd experienced a strange surge of awareness, a sort of mystical tingling feeling that warned him that something was afoot. The first time had been the day his father had died. The second time it had happened, however, the feeling had been completely different. It had been the night of his mother's masquerade, right before he'd seen the woman in the silver dress. Like the time before, the sensation had started in his arms and legs, but instead of feeling numb, this time he felt an odd tingling, as if he'd just suddenly come alive after years of sleepwalking. Then he'd turned and seen her, and he'd known she was the reason he was there that night, the reason he lived in England, hell, the very reason he'd been born. Of course, she had gone and proven him wrong by disappearing into thin air, but at the time he'd believed all that, and if she'd let him, he would have proven it to her as well. Now, they mentioned at the Valentine's Day event that this season was going to be the most similar to the book of all the seasons thus far. The only noteworthy changes that were mentioned were that Araminta and Rosamund would be approached in a more nuanced way and a sympathetic way, instead of them just being these cartoon villains the way they were in the book. And Benedict would not have the more aggressive, angry energy that he had in certain parts of the book. Basically, they're going to maintain the characteristics and the overall vibe of how Benedict has been on the show thus far. We have speculated that Benedict was looking for someone when he saw Sophie in this clip, and that's completely plausible, but I wanted to pull this quote just to show how, if you're having him feel this, and I quote, strange surge of awareness, a sort of mystical tingling feeling that warned him that something important was afoot, and then also a bit after that, he felt an odd tingling, as if he'd just suddenly come alive after years of sleepwalking. Sound off in the comments, but if we pose the question, does this footage match these lines from the book, yes or no, I would have to say yes. I'm not all that picky about the logistics when it comes to this speculation. Any of those options work for me. Benny Capybara Boo Boo is looking for a family member, he's looking for Sophie because he saw her already, or he feels an odd tingling that preludes to him seeing her for the first time. Should we make that an official slogan for Benofi's relationship? When the same reporters that ask you the same questions every year, every junket, describe Benedict and Sophie's relationship in 3 words. don't answer them. Just, you can call me up. Call me on my phone. I'll answer for once. I never answer my phone. I will answer the question for you. An odd tingling.
Bit of foreplay, you know, twinkle in the eye, the deed, you know, pregnancy.
I didn't address this part, but when Benedict entered the ballroom and there are people audibly recognizing him and expressing their interest in getting his attention, I don't think that's actually surprising, and I don't have strong feelings about it one way or another, because the masquerade ball is hosted by Violet at one of the Bridgerton houses, so it's expected that he will be there. And he's also described in the book as being one of the most eligible bachelors of the season. These women live in 18th century England, so they are trying to secure the bag for their very survival. And Benedict is a better option for a husband than the vast majority of these nasty men who are spouting rhetoric in the realm of wed, bed, and bread.
He only circles white people, and I've told him when it comes to finding you a husband, we can't afford to be racist.
But not only that, we circle back to the mask discussion, which often comes up anytime there's any sort of glimpse of Yerin wearing the mask. When we get this HD close-up of Sophie's face in the mask, at this angle where her chin is tilted up, it really further cemented this idea of how the mask is covering her nose. So Benedict won't even know the shape of her nose once he sees Sophie unmasked. And it's also covering the majority of her cheeks. So that would mean that a considerable amount of her face shape is also somewhat concealed. It's the eyes and the mouth that are on display. And I mean, I could make fun of him for not recognizing her when we know very well that Benedict will be spending a considerable amount of time looking at Sophie's eyes and her mouth.
The tasteful thickness of it. Oh my God.
After they're reunited and he doesn't know who she is. But if I use up all my material now of making jokes at his expense, I mean, what will I do next year? Repeat the jokes, clearly. I mean, we know I will. And it also is always the right time to make fun of wealthy English aristocrats, even if he's my favorite of the lot.
You're not as vile as I thought you were.
I have an excerpt from chapter 2 that I will want to share in this video, but before I do that, I want to skip ahead to chapter 23, where Sophie tells Benedict the following. At the masquerade, she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaky, even before I saw you, I felt you. Anticipation, magic. There was something in the air. And when I turned and you were there, it was as if you'd been waiting for me. And I knew that you were the reason I'd stolen into the ball. That is so romantic. I'm just dizzy thinking about that. I will officially be astral projecting to another plane of existence. Thanks a million. It's going to have to be the plane of existence where Pandora is. I mean, don't act surprised. You knew that's where my brain went. That's the most romantic place you can go.
Your heartbeat is fast.
Sorry.
Try to focus.
Okay.
I want to see it, to be in that world, to be enjoying what's happening, to sustain a feeling.
Returning to this clip though, we have her looking up at the chandelier, and this is a really good choice because visually it makes her stand out a lot more than if she was just looking around the room and smiling, because it sets up this sort of call and response dynamic where Benedict can not only observe a gorgeous woman and be immediately enamored, it creates a very clear question in his mind of what is she looking at? So then he has to follow her eye line and he observes that she's looking up at the chandelier. And that already facilitates him starting to play detective about figuring out who she is. I mean, when they start to talk to one another, he's constantly trying to pay really close attention to everything that she's saying and see if he can ascertain any clues that will assist him in unlocking the secret of who she really is. How and why is this woman so different from everyone else? And how do I go about determining the identity when she has not yet given me her name? I mean, you put your mouth all over her ungloved hand and her arm, but you don't know her name.
Well, you know, to be fertile.
Oh, Benedict, you are so unhinged, and I'm ready to watch every second of that. I mean, I'm a James Cameron fan, so of course I love watching men be unabashedly all about their women.
So now, if you'll excuse me, they're playing my jam.
Come on!
So, In an Offer from a Gentleman, Chapter 2. This is a chapter I've already talked about in my ongoing series where I go through the book chapter by chapter. It's usually 2 chapters per video, but anyway, this is the beginning of the masquerade, and I've pulled an excerpt out from when Benedict first sees her. But there was something about her that held him mesmerized. It was her smile, the shape of her eyes, the way she held herself and looked about the ballroom, as if she'd never seen a more glorious sight than the silly members of the ton all dressed up in ridiculous costumes. Her beauty came from within. She shimmered. She glowed. She was utterly radiant. And Benedict suddenly realized that it was because she looked so damned happy. Happy to be where she was. Happy to be who she was. Happy in a way Benedict could barely remember. His was a good life, it was true. Maybe even a great life. He had 7 wonderful siblings, a loving mother, and scores of friends. But this woman knew joy, and Benedict had to know her. So we see there that there's a slight difference in the details, the way she held herself and looked about the ballroom as if she'd never seen a more glorious sight than the silly members of the ton all dressed up in ridiculous costumes. So that would create a different visual where Sophie is looking around the room at the people who are in the ballroom, but the show has her standing still and looking up at the chandelier. That makes her stand out a considerable amount more, especially if he's standing slightly further away from her, which we see he is during this video clip. And actually, I want to talk a bit about the close-up again of her wearing the mask and looking up at the chandelier. One of the most essential details I love about this shot is the lighting. The thing about the lighting is that in order to create a shot like this, you have to set up all the lights just right to create this effect, and then when you carry on with filming the rest of the scene, you're going to have to move those lights elsewhere, depending on what type of shot it is, depending on who you're focusing on. When you light this wide shot of basically everyone in the room, or a considerable amount of people in the room, all these people are lit. The room's lighting simply is what it is. But then when you do this close-up, the lighting has been precisely designed to specifically light Sophie. So the cinematography is different because she's in focus while the people behind her are not, and she's lit in such a way that she is glowing, which is how she's described in the book, while the people behind her look as if they're almost cast in a shadow. Oftentimes when watching direct-to-streaming releases, I tend to notice that the overall appearance will be bad because oftentimes direct-to-streaming releases give off this appearance of being underfunded, of being rushed, that they're not being given the budget to afford the lights, they can't afford the time to pay for production, as well as fair wages for the workers that would be the ones to do things like set up really pretty lighting like this. If this is the one and only shot where the camera and lights are set up in this exact way, I mean, it will be money and labor well spent because the end result is fantastic and it's elevated far above what I might have expected. I've complained about the lighting on this show before, and I had more or less resigned myself to assume that, well, this is simply the material reality of what direct-to-streaming originals will look like now because of the business model of how those companies are run by tech and finance bros. Now, I'm not trying to overly romanticize Hollywood producers from decades past, but when you look at the visual presentation of a lot of older films, I mean, there's just simply no comparison. You can absolutely lambast those old-time producers for a number of morally repugnant things that should not be repeated in present-day film or television production. But I will say that there's clearly something that you can learn a fair bit from, because what artists were able to put together back then, visually speaking, in those time periods is very impressive. Now, admittedly, I am biased in the sense that I prefer the look of Technicolor. That's a bias that I have. And Technicolor requires a different kind of lighting, but that's a whole other tangent I don't need to go in detail about because I don't think people care to hear it. And also, I'm on holiday, as I have said and will probably say again.
Oh, wait a minute. I've already done that.
But even black and white films, there's this one part of, I think it was Mildred Pierce. I know it was a Joan Crawford film that I talked about on Patreon, so it was probably Mildred Pierce, although I did recently watch The Damned Don't Cry, so there is that slight possibility that it was from that, but I'm pretty sure it was Mildred Pierce. But anyway, there's this one shot in the film where two characters are speaking to one another, but you don't see the characters themselves. What you see is their shadows on the wall of them speaking to one another. And listen, that's what I want to see. Give me some extremely indulgent visual artistry and flair. I'm definitely a more is more viewer, and I'm pretty sure my regular viewers know that about me.
Holy shit, look at that. That is a tankard. What do you call that?
But anyway, after this, Sophie is asked to dance by some random man of the Ton. Just go away. Who are you? We don't know who that man is. For all we know, that could be Philip Cavender. You want me to trust Sophie Baek to be in the arms of some random English aristocrat? Absolutely not.
Beat the cops asunder.
But guess who else isn't having it? Benny Boo Boo. Boo Boo Boo.
Pardon me, young lady. Could I trouble you for the next dance?
Put your ring back on, honey tits. You haven't had enough porridge this morning to talk like that.
In the book, Benedict sees that Sophie is being approached by multiple men at the same time who are very interested in her, which is so rude of them to do because Benedict just had the thought in his mind that he needs to know her. So why are you encroaching on his soulmate like that? Just get away from her.
You're a pack of fools! Every last one of you!
The Netflix clip cuts off right after she's been asked the question, could I trouble you for the next dance? Yes, you are trouble. Go away. I'm very protective of her. I have every right to be.
Is that my reputation? Something happens and y'all just waiting on me to be combative? Boo!
If I was the betting type, I would bet money on the fact that immediately after this, Benedict is going to scurry over there in a manner similar to what happens in chapter 2. Excuse me, gentlemen, but the lady has already promised this dance to me. He lied. Sorry, it's funny. Her mask's eye holes were cut a bit large, and he could see that her eyes widened considerably, then crinkled with amusement. He held out his hand to her, silently daring her to call his bluff. But she just smiled at him, a wide, radiant grin that pierced his skin and traveled straight to his soul. She put her hand in his, and it was only then that Benedict realized he'd been holding his breath. I'm fine with that playing out more or less exactly as is, and another detail about why this interaction is so cute in the book is because she doesn't even know at that point that he's Benedict Bridgerton, one of the most sought-after bachelors of the season. It's mostly him and Colin that the women of the Ton are after at this point, but of course that's going to be different on the show because they switched the order of the love stories. So on the show, Colin is already married, so he would not be pursued in that same way. Sophie eventually realizes that Benedict is Benedict once the two of them are interrupted by Colin when they are on their way out of the ballroom to go do a private dance lesson. Sure.
Is that how old people say sex?
But we don't know if that will be altered in any way since, like I already said, the order of love stories was switched and Penelope's secret has been exposed, so I just don't know if they're going to incorporate Sophie's pre-existing knowledge of the Bridgertons into the season the way it was in the book. They could, or if they don't, I just think it could work either way. If they go without her already having that idea of him from the Lady Whistledown newsletters, Benedict doesn't like being sought after simply because of his family name, because he wants to be seen and loved for who he is as his own person. So if they were to tweak a detail like that, I think it would be a pretty seamless modification to fit into the larger infrastructure of what their love story is, even with it apparently being highly true to the book. But not only that, the thing about doing a show is that it has to be modeled around actor availability. And typically, once people have already wrapped their love story, they go on to be booked on other jobs, and we love that for them. Stay booked, stay paid. But if it turns out that returning leads from previous seasons are not going to be present in all 8 episodes or have a more limited amount of screen time, then that would beg the question of, if you are going to use a character like Penelope or Colin to interact directly with the main love story of that season, or if you would like to do something like have them be more involved with setting up future love seasons. They could do both, obviously, but I can never fully anticipate how they're going to approach things like that because of how overcrowded the ensemble is to try to make work in such a short episode count per season. It's really not about who I want to see. I would like to see everybody done well, but every season I always have issues with too much or too little screen time going here or there. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to cover. Well, before we sign off from this video, I also wanted to address the talking point about promotion being released this early and maybe there being some people who feel a bit frustrated at having this small snippet when there is such a long wait still ahead for the full season's release. I much prefer the way they've been doing things in the lead up to season 4, where more or less every couple of months, give or take, there is some sort of new promotional drop, whether it's promotional stills, an interview, a clip, a making of sneak peek. You need to keep the show in the larger pop culture conversation. Now, I'm going to assume that the vast majority of people who are watching this video are already big fans of this series, but the larger audience, we're talking about the general audience, those people are not closely keeping up with the ongoings of this new season while it's in production like this. However, those viewers still matter quite a bit to the success of the show and what sort of future it will have, and whether every Bridgerton will get to do their love story, whether they will try to do more spin-offs at some point. And you need to keep that general audience interested, even if they never surpass being casual viewers, especially when you are asking people to remain invested after 2 years of waiting for a new season of a minuscule 8 episodes. I would never suggest that you go and relentlessly mock a mega corporation on social media for having a business model that maybe isn't conducive to consistently releasing new seasons for the audience the way that regular cable used to do. I mean, who would ever suggest doing such a thing? Mocking mega corporations. Certainly not I.
No, you said it. All I have is sarcasm and a gun.
But I've heard this from different people who work in Hollywood, that it's their full-time job, where these streaming platforms are often not providing their original releases with the necessary resources that would fully set them up for success, or the best chances for success. And that this business model that we see of dragging your feet to renew things, dragging your feet to greenlight writers' rooms to get seasons written so that they can start filming in a timely manner, just dragging your feet every step of the way, and thus resulting in these long 2-year gaps between seasons. The people who make these shows, who have to actually do the creative labor, a lot of those people feel strongly that that model makes people in the general audience, not the hardcore fans, just forget about whatever that show is that they maybe cared about watching a couple of years ago, because it didn't stay with them. We have to remember that it's a very different landscape now. I mean, the internet basically is in a perpetual state of hyper speed, and I'm a film fan, so I keep very close track of what's coming up that will be released in the cinema, and I will also regularly check for films just randomly getting added that I knew nothing about beforehand until they show up as being available to book on any of these cinema ticket websites that I use. I did not know about Den Stiges Desøsteren, I don't know how to pronounce Norwegian, until that film showed up at my local cinema, and I read the log line and I watched the trailer and I went, well, that seems horrific. Let me book a ticket. And it was very horrific, but it also made me laugh multiple times. It was very demented. We don't need to talk about that. I don't think there's a lot of crossover audience between that film and this show. But I bring this up to make the point that most moviegoers don't do that. They don't live and breathe for being at the cinema every week, just like most Netflix subscribers do not keep lists or spreadsheets of what's going to be coming up and released on the platform and when. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of you watching this video that were already aware of all of these talking points, but I still wanted to articulate this point just so that we can try to make sure that we remain aware of the bigger picture of how all of this works so that we can best determine how to support the arts and also artists that are worthy of being supported. Now, I do usually put my clown shoes on whenever I talk about Bridgerton, and I make lots of jokes about the material, but I do like the show, and I would like for it to continue to do well and be highly viewed and be kept in conversation. It's not just about keeping yourself insulated within a small bubble of fandom where those people already know about the show, they already love it, they already keep up with every update very closely, they manage Reddit pages, threads. I don't know all of the Reddit vocabulary, but you understand my point. Now, even if you think that a show like Bridgerton is too big to fail, don't necessarily assume that. Even if there's a Bridgerton season that doesn't live up to mine or your expectations, I always want each season to do well because in general, I would like for there to be more romantic fiction greenlit. Preferably to the cinema because that's my preferred place to watch things, but if it has to be on a streaming platform, that's fine as well. I mean, for example, did you know that Netflix is doing a new Pride and Prejudice limited series, and that Saoirse Ronan's Scottish husband, Jack Lowden, is playing Mr. Darcy? Now, Pride and Prejudice is more than famous enough of a work of fiction to get greenlit on its own. But let's not pretend that it's not going to help people pitch a new production of a new Regency romance project by going, well, go and look at the viewing numbers on this other Regency romance series we've got going on. By the way, bit of a side tangent, I know, but I am fully on board for this new version because I saw this one clip of Jack talking about being a ginger Mr. Darcy, and he's hilarious.
I quite like the idea of being a ginger Darcy. I think that that's really breaking down barriers. One of the great last barriers to be broken down.
Agreed.
Yeah. And I quite like the idea of sort of me coming along and doing something else with it. Or just copying one of them. Because some of the guys that have played it are amongst some of the best. I mean, Matthew McFadden, to me, is one of the best actors on the planet. So if I just try and copy him, maybe that's all right as well.
And you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But ginger.
Yeah, change it up.
Also, apparently he supports Scottish independence, so I automatically feel like we're friends already, even though I have never met this man and I don't know him personally, because one of my friends is a very staunch pro-independence Scot, so that energy feels very familiar to me. Someone does need to fix his Wikipedia page though, because he's labeled on there as a Brit. Really? I mean, in 2025, we have a pro-independent Scotsman who grew up in Scotland, went to school in Scotland, did all of his drama school training in Scotland, and you're calling him British? I have one thing to say in response to that. So Bridgerton season 4 is shaping up to do very well, I think, at least, if my opinion counts for anything. Every sneak peek we've gotten thus far looks good. There are no glaring issues that jump out at me. A lot of the details about other characters and their smaller subplots seem to be a bit more hidden, which I'm mostly fine with simply because I don't need, nor do I desire to know absolutely every detail before I get to watch the full finished season. But with the focus being on Benedict and Sophie, yeah, I'm much more confident in it mostly being able to deliver the emotional tone and vibe that I'm hoping to see from them. I use the word mostly simply because there's a lot we haven't seen, and I'm adamant about wanting their love story to be one that is full of laughter. And laughter and general merriment is not something they've previewed all that much of yet. Now, it could still be a really lovely, compelling love story, even if the two of them are not giggling and making each other laugh a whole lot throughout the season, but I would prefer for there to be a good amount of laughter between them. I mean, do you think I keep rewatching Come With Me As I Shove My Father Into a Balloon because I don't like to laugh? No! I've seen that video at least, I don't know, 10 times, and it's hilarious every time I watch. I was just rewatching it earlier today, and I was laughing so hard that my stomach hurt.
Hey guys, come with me as I shove my father into a balloon. You have 10 minutes now, Ty.
If I wanted to watch melodrama, I would go and rewatch La Venganza de Analia, and I would have the time of my life with that. But this is Bridgerton, and it's Benofi, so for them, I want romance and laughter. And honestly, with this new close-up footage of her in the mask, I remain committed to my preferred headcanon that Benedict will realize that Sophie is the lady in silver because she's going to become his muse, and he's going to start making art of her, and at some point he'll have some sort of drawing or whatever of her face, and something will cover up the top half of her face, and once he only has her mouth and her chin visible, that's when things are going to click in his head of realizing, oh wait, this woman that I'm in love with is the same woman that I fell in insta love with however long ago. I don't think they're doing the time jump, okay? All that to say, I'm optimistic, and yeah, that headcanon and a lot of things about their relationship just remind me of a lot of movies that I really like, but if that's going to be a topic of conversation, that will have to wait for another day. I always have too many videos I would like to make and not enough time to make them. With that, I will simply say, Benofi is an odd tingling. Tell all your friends.
Bask in the ambience. Basking in the ambience.